For Global Business Update, Michael Osin joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Morning. Asia Pacific markets, first of all, as usual, and actually fairly mixed this morning. Nikkei is down about 0.5%, Shanghai Composite down about 0.5% to the MSCI index is relatively flatline. I mean, basically what's going on here is people are still wondering about whether or not China is facing a recession, and all the indications are that it is slowing down very, very slightly. But again, the outlying factors like the zero COVID policy and so on are confusing the picture slightly. So basically, a bit of profit taking as well actually has taken place. As far as Philippines concerned, I draw your attention to that. Like everywhere else, no one seems to be inured from inflation. They've got inflation there now up to 8%. That's the highest for 14 years, and their central bank meeting is mid-December, and it's expected that they will raise their interest rate by 0.5% to 5.5% there when they actually get there at the time. As far as the United States is concerned, relatively flat futures this morning. Investors weighing up, as they always do, economic concerns. Been through that. The Dow fell 350 points in regular trade yesterday. The Nasdaq down 2%. What they're trying to work out is, with the stronger factory orders that we saw yesterday, the good jobs figures that we saw last Friday, is the economy strong enough to keep the Fed thinking it needs to keep interest rate hikes up about 0.75%, or will it reduce them to 0.5% because it's still trying to kill inflation in whatever way it can? I'm going to take you to Apple now, and they're calling this an incredibly significant moment, and they're going to use chips which have been manufactured in the US, in Arizona. The chip factory is owned by the largest manufacturer in the world, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, but they will be made in the United States, and this is further evidence of the United States withdrawing from its dependence upon China. Vietnamese electric vehicle maker plans to have an IPO on the Nasdaq. It's backed by Vietnam's richest man. It seeks an overseas push. Rather, we don't know any details about the date or the size, but it felt that they're looking for something like $2 billion. Going to travel over to the UK now, and we're facing the UK is facing a huge amount of strikes coming up right now. 1 million days will be lost during December, so Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is under pressure to speed up anti-strike legislation. The biggest wave of industrial action, or that's this strange phrase, industrial action. It isn't action at all; it's inaction. But anyway, they call it industrial action here. Since 1989, and Sunak's mantra is they're very, very hard. They're going to come down hard on pay offers. So it looks like they're going to try to tough it out over the winter. Also, Sunak's being pressurized to relax rules on onshore wind turbines. Now, the problem with these is that many districts don't like the fact that they are going to be looking at views like that, for example, and therefore they're opposing the planning of it. But Sunak is facing a rebellion from Tory MPs who are saying we ought to have onshore wind turbines, and so a consultation has started. That's classic sort of political statement for let's kick it into the long grass for the moment. Sunak was originally against wind turbines onshore, but he's finding now that many in his party are saying that they want it. So to appease them, they're going into consultation about it. And finally, the oil market. Now here's a tricky one, really. Prices tumbled yesterday on worries about a recession around the world, and certainly a slowdown in China. Supplies are relatively plentiful, and that's keeping the oil price down. What effect China reopening, if it may, and also the Russian oil cut will have on the oil market, anybody's guess. But basically, if the cap is starving Russia of oil revenue, the lower prices will also join that sort of pressure as well. That is the global view this morning.
Thank you, Michael. Now, just going over to two things. The U.S. Tim Cook saying that chips will be made in the United States of America. I know that the government has plans to subsidize the costs for businesses like Apple. However, I do recognize that Intel also also vying to be part of this arrangement. What are the opportunities for Intel, and then what is the cost implication if this does move away from China producing the chips to the United States of America?
Yeah, the good question about the cost implication. What one assumes that what the Taiwan Semiconductor Company, which owns the factory, would be actually doing is somehow to compete with Chinese prices. But again, we wait to see that, don't we? I mean, as you quite rightly suspect, China has been exporting its cheaper prices and its deflation for some time. Whether or not this will make those chips relatively more expensive, I suspect they probably will, because that's the way the world is going at the moment. But Tim Cook is saying, and he'll be getting a lot of domestic bonus points for this. You know, it's a very important move right now. Your other question was about
Intel.
Sorry?
Intel. U.S. company Intel also vying to possibly produce chips.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, yeah, so the United States, I think, just quite obviously is right now, you know, conducting itself in a trade war with China. I mean, of course, there are mollifying remarks about that, but the fact of the matter is that the US wants to be self-sufficient. But I think you're absolutely right. The cost pressures may dictate a slowdown in sales. I mean, that's something that we don't know right now, and we need to be told about that. I suspect, given that this is just a proposal, that the actual detail of it will become clearer as the weeks go by. I hope they do.
Okay, Michael, a couple of things. Looks like the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is under very heavy pressure. Tory MPs are forcing his hand almost on a daily basis, whether it is housing or now anti-labor legislation or the onshore wind farms on which we had the voices of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Well, but we'll see how that plays out. But I wanted to ask you, I thought you were going to comment on the Trump organization, found guilty of crimes, of dodging tax, and President Trump saying that, this is his enemies at work. He finds it so convenient to blame people all the time. And then second, Morgan Stanley is cutting jobs. Before it, Credit Suisse is also cutting jobs. Goldman Sachs is also cutting jobs. Are the banks really under pressure as a result of decisions taken by the central banks? And finally, what's going on in Indonesia? This thing they call Bali bunk ban. They are coming up with a new law that people who are not married are not supposed to be seen together in a bedroom. And that if they try it, they will be fined. And we're told that that has business implications because it's likely to affect business, tourism in particular, because people in Australia are anxious, people in Canada who go to Indonesia for just to have fun are saying that tourism will be affected. What's President Joko Widodo, Jokowi as he's otherwise called, what is he up to?
I think basically what you're seeing there, Indonesia. I mean, you suspect absolutely right. I mean, it would be very, very strange, wouldn't it, for that country to allow tourism to wane on this. It may just be intended for domestic consumption. I suspect that's what it is, rather than being something that's actually going to happen. As far as Trump's concerned, yeah, I mean, we see these things every day, don't we? I didn't feel necessary able to comment on it because it's still very much ongoing, and quite honestly, I feel a much more important debate is who's actually going to lead the Republicans at the next election. Will it be Ron DeSantis, for example? I do think that Trump, in a sense, is a busted flush, and I feel as though the United States will probably is probably suffering right now now as they think about who they need to replace these figures. Will Joe Biden run again? I mean, I simply don't know. It's very, very difficult to decide, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael, for taking us through the global business update.